My name is Annie Lee Stancil. I was born October the 20th, 1918. Testing, one, two, three.
Welcome to Point of Rock Studios. On behalf of 90 over 90, I'm Rob Sumner. It's my pleasure to welcome Annie Lee Stancil to Point of Rock Studios in 90 over 90. Annie was born on October 20th, 1918 and was married to William Shirley Stancil for over 64 years. But together they raised two children, Agnes Niece and Jim Stancil. She's the proud grandmother of 5 and great-grandmother of 4. Annie Lee is retired as a longtime school teacher and homemaker. Annie Lee, welcome to Point of Rock Studios. Thanks for being here in 90 over 90. Glad you could make it.
Thank you.
Now you live in Charlotte now, is that correct?
That's right.
Now, how long have you lived there?
I've been a long time. I'm in a carriage club. I'm in a retirement home.
Okay.
I'm in my 6th year there in a retirement home in Charlotte.
Are you enjoying your time there?
Yes.
Good. We're going to talk a little bit about your early life, and then maybe a little bit about your raising your family, and I know you were born in Anson County.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what that was like, what you remember about your early years and where you were born.
Well, I was born out in the country from Wadesboro, and remember the youngest of several children. And I rode a school bus to school, and
Now there were 6 children, I believe, is that
yeah,
correct?
Uh-huh.
And you were the youngest.
Uh-huh.
What was it like being the youngest of 6? Did you?
Well, I had a lot of people to look after me.
You did.
Tell
Did
me
that?
what not to do. So I did very well with that, you know.
Was it? I think some people say the youngest one sometimes gets spoiled, but was that not the case in your case?
Well, I think by the time I was born, my mother was tired of punishing children, so I got to do what I wanted to do.
Well, I'm sure you were well behaved anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Were you well behaved?
Well, I had a lot of people to tell me how with all my brothers and sisters, so
All right.
I knew when to behave.
Now, you lived out in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Was it officially called a farm, or what would you call it?
My daddy was a cotton farmer in the out from Wadesboro, and we rode a school bus to school. I went to country schools, almost like private schools, because there were not too many children. See, blacks and whites were not together back then.
Mm-hmm.
Mine were all white children, and I started when I was 6 and went straight through that school, finishing high school from the country school.
Now, were you required to work on the farm?
No.
You did not. So you got to be a kid. You got to be a child and play.
I did not have to do anything on the farm. My daddy had cotton farmers, and he always had somebody of the tenant workers who could help my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mother looked after the children and did the cooking
Okay.
and sent us to school.
Now, do you have fond memories of being on the farm? Is that something you like to think about?
Very happy childhood.
It was.
A very happy childhood.
Now, when we talked, I don't know if this is the right time to bring it up, but when we talked earlier, you mentioned the word determined several times. And do you remember that you were a determined child, that you had a lot of kind of competitive spirit?
I was always wanted to be the best in the group. I was pretty competitive.
And that included sports, I guess. That includes sports in school. Did you try to be the top of your class?
Yeah. I played basketball, And back then, the girls were at one end of the court, you know, they separated the girls, the guards and or I want to say the guards and the forwards.
Mhm.
And an outdoor court, I always played on an outdoor court.
And so you played at a time when the
Yeah.
team wasn't allowed to go from one end to the other.
Yeah.
Now, did you do that in high school or middle school or junior high?
High school.
High school, okay. Where did you attend high school? Do you remember the name of it?
The name of the school was Deep Creek Baptist, Deep Creek School.
Mm-hmm. Was it was it affiliated with the Baptist school, Baptist
No,
church? It
no,
was not?
It was a public school. It was
All
a
right.
public school.
How many people were in your class? Do you recall?
You mean when I graduated?
Yes, ma'am.
16 or 17, something. That's about, I'm not sure, but 16 or 17 in the class.
Now, what did you do? What did a young girl do for entertainment when she was in high school in the mid-30s, or actually probably the late 20s?
Well, we had, we had junior, senior proms, just like you do now, and we had to find the boys had to find a girl to take to the prom, and I usually got to go.
You did?
Yeah.
You were asked?
Yeah.
Did all the girls get to go?
All of them.
Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes they needed a little help.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yeah. And the other people in the class would help. If there was anyone who didn't have an invitation, they'd find somebody to go and take them, you know, so everybody would get an invitation.
Now, who was how far away was your nearest neighbor?
We had to cross the creek. I had neighbors up the hill from me. Yeah,
So
I didn't have very far to get to neighbors.
Oh, I see. What else besides cotton? Tell me a little bit more about the farm. I want to hear a little bit more about what went on the farm in terms of did you have a working farm? Did you have animals and all that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, we had cow, and we had chickens, and we had turkeys, and what else?
Did you have a garden?
Garden, yeah. My mother always planted her green peas on the 14th of February.
What's significant about that date?
I don't know.
That's what she did.
Yeah.
I guess, do you have any, you would have been, about the time the Depression came, you would have been 12 or 13. Do you have any memories of that, or was that something as a child that you didn't give much thought to?
Well, I knew we didn't have any money, and
How did you know that?
because we, well, I just knew it. I don't know why I knew it.
Maybe you didn't get anything for Christmas?
Yeah, well, my brothers always told me that, you know, when they put the stocking out, and my brothers were older, and they would always come in and taste of what you know, we'd always get something to eat, and they always told me Santa Claus ticked him.
Oh, so Santa Claus would take some of your food?
Yeah.
That's what they told you?
Yeah.
Did it bother you? Did you, since you knew that you didn't have a lot of money or times were hard, did that affect your life in any way?
Not at that point. Now, when the time came to finish high school, it bothered me because I did not know whether I was going to be able to go to college or not.
What kind of student were you?
Well, I was always number 1, 2, or 3.
In your class?
Yeah. But that wasn't too much because there weren't too many in my class.
Were you able to go to college?
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, we had someone in the neighborhood who worked for Wingate College. But
Right.
at that time, it wasn't in Wingate University, it was just a Wingate College. But we had someone coming around looking for people to go to school. And
You raised your hand.
I raised my hand. And I went to Wingate 2 years, worked. I worked in the kitchen. No, I didn't. I worked in the dining room
Mm-hmm.
and in the library when I was at Wingate.
So it was like a work-study program where
Yeah.
you worked and then they allowed you to go to school
I
there.
lived there. I lived in the dormitories, but I worked extra time, you see. Let me see,
Now that was a 2-year school at that time,
Yeah.
right?
2-year school.
And so that and when you finished your study there, you where'd you go?
Went to Meredith, which is a Baptist school in North Carolina, and I got a DAR scholarship to go to Meredith, and that helped some. And I worked at Meredith too.
Well, let's back up a minute. Did you how did you do it in school at Wingate? Were you a good student there?
Well, I guess so, because I got a scholarship to go on.
Well, I guess that was a dumb question.
I don't brag on myself.
No, well, I don't blame you, but it's okay. I think it'll give you some license to brag on yourself. So you got the scholarship, and did that pay for your 2 years at Meredith?
Part of it, and I borrowed some money.
You did?
I borrowed money.
And you worked.
I worked and I borrowed some money.
Did you enjoy school? Was it fun? Was it hard work? Did you like it?
I enjoyed it.
Did you have a social life in college?
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that. What do you remember about that?
Well, I always had boyfriends.
You did?
and
How many?
I don't know. None of them were really important.
They were. What was important? School?
But mostly, yeah.
What did you want to be? Did you know what you wanted to do with your life at that time?
Well, at the time I was in college, there was not much to do except teach or be a nurse.
Uh-huh.
And so I chose to teach.
And I guess the boys had other choices, didn't they? The boys that went to school could be
Yeah.
a doctor or a lawyer or whatever they wanted to be.
Uh-huh.
And did you get a teaching certificate and then get a job right out of college?
I got a teaching certificate from North Carolina.
All right. And see, Meredith is in Raleigh. Where was your first job? Your first teaching
I
job?
taught in Pineville, North Carolina, which at that time was a public school, and I stayed in a teacherage when I was teaching.
It's like an apartment for teachers.
Yeah.
And had you met Mr. Stancil at that time?
Well, I met him when I was at Meredith.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Tell me how that happened. Do you
Well,
recall?
I had a roommate who, I went home with a roommate, and my husband at that time came over there, and we played dominoes. You know what dominoes are?
Yes, ma'am.
We
I do.
played dominoes, and
But he was obviously not your husband at that time. He came over to did he come over to check you out, or what? Is that what it was?
well, I guess somewhat. But anyway, we played dominoes, and then I didn't really date him.
Were you impressed by him when you first met him? Did he make an impression on
guess
you?
so.
A little bit? Because you had other boyfriends too, you were
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
at that time as well.
Yeah.
And when did you see him again?
Well, while I was at Meredith, I saw him fairly often then because, see, he lived in Garner, which is just out from Meredith, from Raleigh.
What did he do for a living at that
He
time?
did.
What did he do for a living?
He was in school. He went to NC State, and he worked for the public school.
Public service?
Yeah, public service in the schools there while he was in school.
All right.
Uh-huh.
And so y'all saw each other, and I guess, when did you introduce him to your mom and dad?
I'm sorry.
When did you introduce him to your mother and father? Did you take him home at some point and introduce him to your parents?
You know, I don't remember.
You don't remember how they got, how you did that? When did he ask you to marry him? Do you remember that?
That was after I was out of school teaching. Yeah.
Okay.
I was in Pineville at that time.
All right. And he was
in service.
he was in the service.
He was in World War II.
All right. So the war had started. World War II had started, and
And I taught in Norfolk one year.
Norfolk, Virginia.
And we had, the schools were very crowded because of the situation with the war. And I had when I was in Norfolk, I had stood at a door, and I had one class over here and another class over here to try to teach to both of them.
At the same time?
At the same time. I don't know. I never did know how much I taught.
Well, you probably you doing the best you could, I suppose. So you had all those soldiers there.
Yeah.
They were shipped out, and they left their families there, and here you were.
The reason, and he did not get shipped out because he was in Norfolk, and they found out he could type, so they put him in the office, and his job was to send people out, interview and send people out.
And he stayed in Norfolk for the entire duration of the war.
Yeah. Then after the war, we came back to Raleigh, and he joined the Navy for about 6 months, I guess. And then he went to work in, he sold business machines.
All right, is that what he did? Is that what his career was?
Mm-hmm.
And you still taught, I take it. You were still a teacher, is that
Yeah.
correct? What did you like about teaching? Did it appeal to you?
Well, sometimes I was just glad to go home.
I bet you were. It's a hard job.
Yeah.
But you moved back to the Raleigh area or Charlotte. Where did you move from Norfolk after you left?
We went back from Norfolk. We went back to Norfolk to. I guess we went to Raleigh.
All right. And did you teach there?
Mm-hmm.
And
In Hayes Barton.
and he continued to work, I guess, in his business.
I'm sorry.
He continued to work in his chosen field and selling.
Yeah.
Now, how did you get to Charlotte? Tell me how that happened.
Well, the first time we came to Charlotte, I guess it would have been, we got out of service and we ended up in Charlotte. And my husband was supposed to go to work with a company. He and another person were building a recreation center, and he started working there, and I was not teaching. I guess I had a child by then, and then that did not work. So then he started selling business machines.
Now, you have two children, Agnes, I mentioned, and Jim. Did you leave the teaching profession when they were born and start raising them?
Yes.
What was that? What was that like? Was that difficult?
They were pretty good children.
They were.
They were good children.
They were. What kind of? Let me ask you. What kind of? If you don't mind me going back to your early days with your parents, I want to talk. I want you to talk a little about your mom and your dad, and describe the kind of relationship you had with them, and a little bit about what you remember about them in terms of how they raised you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
We lost our home during the Depression, but the home I grew up in, we had a front porch, and the reason we lost our home is because we had remodeled the house, and when Depression came, he couldn't keep the payments up. So that's how we lost our home.
So
So.
the bank took the house back.
Mhm.
And were you in college then, or were you?
Yep, I
you
was
were?
in college.
So you were aware of it, but you were not living there.
Oh, yeah, I was aware of it.
And I guess all your brothers and sisters, had they grown up and moved
Yeah,
away?
I'm the youngest. And,
How did that affect your parents, your mom and dad? Did they just?
well, it was pretty tough.
It was.
But my mother and daddy were very strong Christians, and they never let it stop them. They just kept working. My daddy was a very hard-working person,
Mm-hmm.
and my mother kept the house and took care of the children.
Now you say your parents were strong Christians. How did that show up in their life? What did that mean? What does that mean to you?
Well, I always went to Sunday school and church. The only time we didn't get to go was when we didn't have a car. And if we didn't have a car, we couldn't go to church. But most of the time, we went to Sunday school and church.
That was important. That was an important part of your day. Did they talk to you about that, or is it just something that they did and it led by example?
Example.
Because I noticed when I was at your house, you said that you read. Didn't you tell me you read the Bible every day?
Yeah, still do.
You still do, and have done that all your life.
Yeah.
And why do you do that?
Well,
Is it,
because I believe we should.
is it comforting to you?
Comforting. And I've always loved poetry. And I sit down lots of times at night and just read poems and enjoy doing that too. That's comforting too.
All right, Miss Stancil, when you were raising your family in Charlotte, what did y'all, tell me a little bit about what y'all did as a family, some of the things you did growing up, raising your children. Did you go on vacations? Did you
Well, that all depended on what we could afford.
Oh, okay.
And we still we took our children to church and Sunday school when they were growing up. And back then, we had a little card that each child could take home and learn the verse on the card. They don't have those anymore.
Now, was Jim a good student of the Bible?
Yeah.
Was your son Jim a good student of the Bible?
He was then, but I don't know whether he is now.
Okay. Well, I think maybe he'll.
I'm sorry.
I'm sure he is I'm sure he's done quite well in that regard. Thank you for being here and being a part of this program. I do hope that you've enjoyed it and had an opportunity to talk a little bit about your early life and your teaching. Is there anything else you'd like to add that you haven't said that we've talked about before?
Anything you all think of? I don't think so. I was not.
You mentioned a couple of times earlier that you were very determined, and that seemed to be an important theme for you. And
I'm
you're still
there.
determined. And
That's why I keep going. It's because lots of days I don't feel like I could make it, but I get up and I go.
Sure. That's important, don't you think?
Yeah.
Well,
And I have a purpose for getting up. It's to help somebody and to do some good deed for somebody every day.
I can't think of a better purpose than having that as your goal every day. I want to thank you for being here, and we'll see you on the internet, all right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Annie Lee.